I'm going to be 100% responsible. And if life is about effort plus blessing plus destiny, then at least I'm putting in the effort.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming back to the Tell Me Más podcast. Thank you so much for all of your support. I'm super excited today to talk to someone that I met about a year and a half ago when I was still selling a particular media product. Her name is Barreta and
Barbetta.
Barbetta, perdón, Barbetta. You know what? Because I was thinking about Orieta and Barbetta, and I didn't
Oh,
combine it.
but everybody has fun saying it, so welcome to the club.
Ori,
Orieta
it
Barbetta.
is.
Even
It's super fun.
my kid gives me a
Orieta
hard time with
Barbetta.
it too.
No, es lindísimo el nombre. But she is an influencer marketing manager at Samsung. And that's where we met. And I got to confess to you, Ori, that when we met, or after that initial meeting, I was like, she's going to be a guest on the podcast that I
Oh my
eventually will start.
God.
And so, yeah, no, I was absolutely sure that I wanted to get you on here. And even cooler, you're the first woman I've had so far.
No way.
Yeah, you're the first woman I've gotten to speak to. So I'm really, really pumped about that.
I am so honored. Thank you for the
No, of course.
invitation. It obviously was a pleasure working with you back in the day. But also, you don't know this because I didn't tell you this before, but one of my New Year's resolutions for 2024, and we're obviously entering September, was to actually put together a podcast that really kind of pass the torch down and help address this specific topic that we're talking about today. And this is actually the second opportunity that I get to do this year as a guest. The
Okay.
first one was amazing with one of our creators who also has a podcast. So I'm really excited that you brought this to me because I've had to put mine on the back burner just because of other
Yeah.
priorities. Mom to a 4 year old, very demanding
Yeah.
job, obviously like managing health and all the things. So I was really happy to hear from you and your invitation and how specifically it talks about the things that I'm passionate about. So thank you so much for thinking of me and thank
Great.
you for bringing me on.
Awesome. Awesome. And yeah, it's gonna. I don't want to give it away too early, but it'll be interesting when we get to career and career advice from you because I, I had to make a switch in my head, and so I'll tell you about it when we get to that point. But I think
Okay.
it's important, certainly for me. But so yeah, we want to talk about career, talk about life balance, but part of sort of the pillars of this podcast is about making sort of deeper connections with people, right? And
Mhm.
there's just so much wisdom in our lives that is accumulated well before um, professional life, right? That perhaps contribute to success in professional life. But I'd love to know, where are you from? Like, tell me a little bit about your family, kind of your story there.
Yeah. Well, the accent's about to come out. I'm from Valencia, Venezuela. So I was born in
I didn't know that.
Venezuela late in the 80s. And then I grew up in Venezuela when it was amazing. When, you know,
In the good old days.
the good old days, the oil boom, the time when it was like, the USA of the South, where people from all over the world were migrating to Venezuela to get a good job, to have, a stable economy. So I was very lucky to experience my country growing up and just kind of live through some really fun times. Obviously, like we weren't a wealthy family, so we weren't like really kind of plugged into all the amazing things that were happening, but just even being surrounded by it and like seeing that just kind of from a young age really instilled in me like a sense of hope that I could do something, that I could get out of poverty, that I could do something more with my life. And obviously that kind of went out the window with the new millennium, and it's been a struggle for my people
Yeah.
for the last 24 plus years. But I was lucky enough to grow up in that time when it was just beautiful to be there and just experience a beautiful beautiful life there.
Yeah, it really is amazing to think about. Like, I honestly had no clue you were from Venezuela, but it's just so sad to realize that at that time Venezuela was the third largest economy in the Western Hemisphere. I
Yep.
mean, plain and simple. And now how far it's gone, and just a little moment of recognition for what is currently going on down there. It's a topic that I'm absolutely obsessed with and trying to follow the headlines on,
Mhm.
and praying that finally in the next few weeks, maybe months, hopefully,
Yeah.
that the change finally comes.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've been praying for that for many years, and it's interesting because this is like the moment where we all have the most shared hope, and I think that really makes a difference, right? Like when we are all kind of united praying for this and have that hope that something good can come out of this. I don't really share a lot, especially in my professional life, kind of where I'm from and stuff. Not because I want to hide my identity or anything like that, but just because it doesn't really come up. Like that our conversations are very straight to the point. Let's make business, especially working for Samsung. It's like chop, chop, chop. But no, I want to know where you're from. Tell me your background. I don't want to reverse
Oh,
the interview, but I'd love to hear
no,
from
no,
you.
please, absolutely. This is a conversation. It's not an interview.
Cool.
No, so I was actually born in White Plains, New York, and my parents came from Peru and Chile. So kind of a rare combination that they hooked up,
Lovely
way back when.
combination. Yeah.
Yeah, in
Best food in the
early
Southern
70s.
Hemisphere. Come on.
Exactly. So they met in New York, and then when I was a young kid, I think 6, 7 years old, we moved to Katy, Texas. Um,
Mm.
um, and was there all the way through high school. And we moved up to Dallas because of work opportunities with my parents. And I finished up my senior year there in Katy and applied to one single school, which was the University of Texas at Arlington, because like
Oh,
I,
that's
I
funny.
I didn't I knew I wasn't gonna get to go away to college, right? So it I just knew, all right, I'm gonna be a commuter, and it's a 45-minute drive every single day to school, and that's I just find it just so funny because it never I they were like, "Why?" I mean, explain the purpose of going away. Why would you go away?
Oh
You
yeah,
know?
Latino parents. Sorry, we're kind of overbearing.
Yeah, yeah, for
Sorry,
sure.
we have that exact same thing in common. I knew that I couldn't go away to college. I wanted to go to UT Austin, and
Me
kind of
too.
like my life at that moment was like, no, I'm going to apply to just this one school. Like, mind you, I didn't even graduate high school here. I graduated high school in Venezuela. Took a hiatus of like 2 years to learn English. Graduated high school there, moved here, obviously didn't go to college for 2 years. I had to learn the language. And then I started going to a community college. And when my time was up, I was like, where am I going? I'm like, well, I got to work to support myself and my family. So
Right?
where do I think I'm going? I'm going to commute 45 minutes from Mesquite, from the east side of Dallas to Arlington to go to school every day. And I did that for 2.5, for 2 years. So we have that in common, that very unique
Yeah.
thing. We have that in common. That's very strange.
Yeah, and it is so strange because I just went down for my and I will age myself for my 30th high school reunion just a couple weeks ago
I'm
to
not good at
Katy,
math.
Texas. When my family moved to Katy, Texas, I can assure you we were maybe 10 Latino families in that entire city, in that
Mhm.
entire suburb
I
of
believe it.
Houston. But I went down, and a lot of folks said, "Oh yeah, well when you go drive by your old house and that main street, that's right in front of your house, you're not going to recognize it." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Come on, how much is it going to change?" It is absolutely changed, and
Oh yeah.
I can't tell you how cool it was to be able
Mm.
to have not 1, 2, 5 Venezuelan restaurants to choose from.
Oh,
Dos
Katie.
colombianos and 2 Argentinian restaurants, which I
Like
can't even find here, not even 1 in Dallas.
they call
But
it Katie Suela in the community.
Venezuela, yeah, it is, and so, to a certain degree, thank you, Maduro, for pushing all these great people over here because they certainly make life
I
for us
I
great,
literally have
in my
my
opinion.
all my entire close family here, obviously for the first time in many years. And that was because things got tougher. So, I was kind of an immigrant on my own with my mom and my sister, and then my entire immediate family decided to move. And that is because things got tougher. So, it was a family reunification in the States versus in Venezuela, like we always dreamt we could have. But it was a reunification nonetheless. And I would say, like, the amount of culture and restaurants and events and things that are around, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I pick your choice. Like, what are you into? What kind of food do you want to explore? What supermarket do you want to go to? And that's a
Yeah.
huge blessing to be able to bring my child up
It
in that
is.
environment where I can bring him in to like experience all that.
100%. Yeah. Every summer, I never went to summer camp. My parents shipped my sister and I at the age of 12 to Peru for a month. And,
Best time
you
ever.
know, yeah, it was the greatest, most transformational experience of my childhood for sure. And it
Mm,
honestly changed the trajectory of my entire life, those summer vacations that we got to spend there.
that's
Um,
amazing.
s- so, okay, you graduate high school in Venezuela, you arrive here, you learn English, but when you start going to college, what was your plan? Like what were you trying to become?
My 16, 17-year-old brain couldn't really compute what my plan was. The plan was to learn English and go back home. Because I had been accepted at a really great university back home, and I was going to go for I think it was like a finance degree. So I was like,
Okay.
all set. I'm like, oh, I'll just like learn the language here, then go back and like graduate and start my life. And then things just kept getting tougher in Venezuela. So then my plan kind of had to change. And so my plan became, let's see when I'm able to go back home. And so in that time, obviously, I learned English. I started going to community college. Then I went to the University of Texas at Arlington. Then I got an internship during that time with NBC, which turned into like a part-time job at Telemundo. So it's my first opportunity to like get paid to do what I wanted to do. And then that turned into an opportunity to work with Edición, which then turned into an opportunity to then work in a top market, which then, it just kind of all evolved. So to tell you what my plan was to learn English and go back home. And that just really never happened, right? Because I was just always waiting for the right time to go back. And um, kind of on the path, I realized like, like the waiting game may just never end. So I'm just gonna have to like make a life here. And that was a tough realization, especially as I like came of age and like was ready to like
Mhm.
start a family and all that. And I was like, oh my God, like what if I marry someone from like a completely different country and then they also want to go back home, which is exactly the case. My husband's from Puerto Rico and we would just
Okay.
always daydream of
Oh yeah.
living on the island and stuff. And so yeah, I mean that was the plan. In I think one of the things that I'd love people to take away from this conversation is that you can have a vision for your life, but that doesn't mean that it has to be a rigid plan because you have to be open for those possibilities and for those gifts for the people you meet along the road, for the blessings you get, for the things that are just kind of meant to be. I don't think we're all, I mean, we are empowered to make our own decisions and make our own path, but having that flexibility to kind of like give in to the things that are meant to be for you just makes it that much more enjoyable. So, yeah, I would have loved to go back home, but that's just not going to happen now.
Right, right. And again, hopefully that opportunity does exist for sure. So, um, what I wanted to tell you about is as I was preparing
Mm,
this conversation, I sat down with my wife and I was like, "Oh, so here's just my first draft of the questions that I want to talk to Ori about, and tell me what you think." She's like, "Great." She's like, "But did you realize you wouldn't if she was a man, you wouldn't be asking those questions?" And I'm like,
oh,
"What do you mean?" And she's like, "Yeah, if she was just a guy that you knew, you wouldn't ask her these questions." And honestly, it kind of floored me because I I think of myself as one of those guys that gets it, right? That's, has has learned of, how the workplace should now be. All about that stuff. But there's clearly blind sides. There's blind spots that I wasn't even aware of, and it that just somehow miraculously ties into exactly what this little podcast is about, is like asking the questions without shame, or embarrassment.
mhm.
And I had to confess to you that, yeah, my initial directions of questions were very unintentionally misogynistic. It's actually kind of crazy. you
I did
know?
not see it that way. I actually I appreciate your like your wife having that perspective. But I didn't know the context of me being the first woman, so I don't know the extent of the other questions. So I really couldn't tell. I obviously I know that your
Sure.
intentions are pure, and I appreciate
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
wife for collaborating with you and kind of calling you out. And you know, we need that. We need people around us to tell us, "Oh, you haven't thought about it this way." That's what we do. That's what makes life rich, right? Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and I actually like when I was reading the questions, it actually took me through like a journey because to your point, like I thought we were going to talk about like oh professional achievement and like the secret sauce, and then the more I read the questions, the more I was like, oh no, like your journey as a person, your childhood, your challenges, the things that formed you, the things that make you who you are, the struggles of your day to day life, and all those things are important. So you know, I don't think the questions were
Yeah.
anything, but there's nothing wrong with the questions. But it didn't took me through a journey where I was like, oh, I have to prepare to answer this publicly, because I am a very private person, not because of anything wrong, but because I have a very tough story. Like my story growing up was very difficult. So I was like, oh shit,
Mm.
excuse me, oh pardon. I have to prepare to talk about this, and this is a painful subject. But I think there's no inspiration without struggle, unfortunately. Like if everything was easy and was handed to me and um whatever, like those are things that you don't know, but I think those are things that make the story interesting, right? The struggle growing up, the migration, the having to adapt to a new culture, the having to kind of realize that you may never go back home because you've now made your life in a different country, and all those things. I think that pain makes the story very rich. It makes the story relatable, hopefully for listeners who are listening into things like this because they are looking for that strength, for that inspiration, for the path to that North Star. So I am happy to answer all of your questions if you choose to ask them.
Yeah. I mean, you absolutely well just inspired me from the perspective of okay, the fact that you were an immigrant at the age that you were. I mean, now, eh, do you feel that you grew up with, or in your college years and entering your professional life? Do you feel that you carried a certain weight that you had no choice but to succeed, that you had to do everything right?
Yes. And there's a little tidbit that I have to tell you before I answer that.
Yep.
So, when I was 11, my mom turned 40. And when she
Okay.
turned 40, she decided to change her life. And as I near 38, I'm like, oh, she might have been onto something. So she had a little bit of like a midlife crisis and decided to move countries on her own. So she got up one day and she decided that she was going to move to the States. We were all living in Venezuela. She had separated from my dad. So it was me at 11, my sister who was 13, and another sister who was 17. And my mom decided that she wanted to start over. And so it was just me and my two sisters. So there was not an adult around. We kept just kind of operating the way that we would if parents were around, right? Going to
Mhm.
school and like doing all the right things. But when I moved to the States, was because I wanted to just kind of really give myself a shot at having a relationship with my mom. So I actually moved to the States to be with my mom after having been without her for a period of like over 5 years.
Wow.
So it was an opportunity to kind of reconnect with her. And it
Wow.
was also an
That
opportunity to like learn the language and stuff. And so that, I mean, was there a wait? Yes, but like that was like the better of all the options, right? The other option was like staying back home and like marrying someone who could pay for my nails.
right.
But yeah, so there was a lot of weight, but the weight didn't come from my parents' expectations. My parents weren't not around; they just weren't around in a traditional area. Like we didn't live with mom
Mhm.
and dad; we lived with dad portions of the time, but for the most part, we were basically kind of on our own. And so
Got
my
it.
sisters have just, they're basically my all kinds of relatives. They're not just my sisters. They can be parental in certain instances. They can be just everything I need in most cases. But it was really interesting because the pressure didn't come from, oh, growing up in the States as a Latino kid and like your parents wanted, kind of holding up the whole, not holding it up, but like you feeling like your parents left their life for you and that you owe them and that there's this whole retribution. It really wasn't that. Like for me, it was survival. It was you have two choices. Either you go back home and figure out how to get a job and figure out how to kind of support yourself and be on your own in a lacking economy, or you master everything here and you learn how to become American, you learn how to speak the language, you learn how to hack the system and then succeed here. So it was really more of a survival. So my story isn't necessarily the same as a lot of people's, but I think there's still a lot of power in it because it really was something that came from within. Like no one really pushed me to go to college. No one really pushed me to, do the things I wanted to do. It came from within. It was born from a sense of survival, but it was definitely also from realizing like, hey, this life that I'm living, I don't deserve it. And I'm not talking about poverty and I'm not talking about finances. I'm talking about happiness and stability and kind of just living in a place where I feel like I'm in control of my thoughts and emotions and my destiny for the most part, right? Like, I don't want to be a victim of my story. So, how can I pull
Wow.
myself out of, this, no parents around, no money, no structure, no guidance, and just be like, okay, well, if I'm on my own, then I'm going to be 100% responsible. And if life is about effort plus blessing plus destiny, then at least I'm putting in the effort and I'm getting a 70.
That's no, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm like kind of tidal waved me with, I mean, there's just so much wisdom in that experience. And clearly you've done a lot of soul searching, having had such a difficult sort of background. And you seem so, I don't know, at peace with it and almost empowered by it. It's like that's and
Mm.
oftentimes that's not what you hear. It's like people still don't truly process, and especially Latino people. And then I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting that, but we don't seek out that help, the therapy help to say, hey,
Yeah.
this is what I kind of carry, and like, what do I do with this? And so, but you sound like someone who has very consciously sort of interpreted that and really
Yeah.
leverage it to a certain degree.
Yeah, I have leverage. I think leverage would be the word. It also like a lot of it is driven by survival, right? Like I have to survive. Like I have this conversation with my husband all the time. And it's like if all fails, you have your house in Puerto Rico, you have that net of being part of the American system that most of the Caribbean islands don't have, right? Like call it welfare, call it whatever, but they would never go hungry, they would never go homeless. There is something that kind of supports society, at least at the very basic level. That most countries are kind of like Venezuela, Peru, Chile, all those countries just don't have that. So like I give him the example of like jumping without a net, right? Like I if you jump and fall, like you're good. You have a place to go back to. There's a system that I now get to leverage because obviously I'm part of his life and we have family there. But for me, it was always that mentality of like I have to make this work because I have no net. Like if I fall, it's free fall and it's the end of it. So there's a lot of discipline that came from it. And then the more I tried to build my life and make something amazing out of whatever I was handed, the more I realized that there was three parts to what I wanted to achieve. There was the mental portion, right? There was the emotional portion. Um, and then there was the spiritual portion, right? There was like I could achieve as much as I wanted to. I was the first one to graduate with a college degree in the States, and like my family in Venezuela, like just basically like worship me for a couple of years. They were like, "How did you do it? You spoke no English, and
Yeah.
you had no documents, and it was all the challenges were against me." And I'm like, "I did it!" Like for me, I was very empowered, like mentally for a while. But then it was like, I still feel like I didn't achieve anything because all I have is just a degree. And for me, this was a milestone. But like, how do I turn the degree into a career?
It
So it
was the
wasn't
first
until
step.
I started,
It was just a step. Yeah.
it was just a step, right? Like everybody thought, no, no, this is the key. And I'm like, well, that's the key, but you got to find out which door you're going to go through. And like, you got to kind of keep going. So when I realized that there was like a mental, an emotional, and a spiritual component to my life, then I started working on going to therapy, finding my faith. I explored lots. I did meditation at Buddhist temples. I did like spiritual retreats with like youth, like Christian groups and stuff. And always, I just always got this sense of like, it doesn't matter where you go or where you worship or whatever. Like, if you really like believe like God's within you and you kind of go inward, um, and kind of try to nurture that relationship with like yourself and God and whatever you believe in. Like that for me was just such a huge relief. Like I could go through anything if I have God. I could go through any like challenge, but I have God and I have my belief that He's going to get me through it. And then I looked back and I realized, oh my God, like everything that I just went through could have ended really bad. And if I didn't have God in my life and if I didn't really listen to like that inner voice, I could have made some really horrible mistakes that would have been like life changing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. I did a lot of work, a lot of like seeking therapy and seeking God and just doing all the things that kind of give you a well-rounded life. It wasn't really just about having a profession and, you know, making it financially. It was really about having a better life.
Absolutely. And it's such a beautiful thing to, stop and have a moment of gratitude and realize what a monumental change your life is now through your hard work than it would have been had you not made the decision to leave, perhaps. I often think about why was I accidentally, for zero real reason, born here and, got all of the advantages of having been born here and that education. And it's just, it's something that kind of boggles the mind sometimes when I really sit down and think about, look what I'm getting to do right now. I'm getting to invite people from my office studio and talk about their lives. And I'm like, man, like any one small little decision, and I'd, be working, who knows, in construction in Latin America today,
Oh, 100%. Or not have a job and just be depending on whatever the government gives you, like in
Yeah,
Cuba and in other countries.
right.
You know, I think about
Absolutely.
it. I think about it a lot. And my son was obviously born in the States, and he's half Puerto Rican, half Venezuelan, and we always talk about this as immigrant parents, like what's our child's experience going to be? How can we get him closer to Puerto Rico? Because obviously we can't go back to Venezuela, but how do we keep him close to like the culture and the community? And how do we provide him with an experience that's similar to ours so that he shares our values? And it's hard, right? Like we take yearly trips to Puerto Rico. We're very close to our family. Like obviously try to keep him close to culture and stuff. And there are upsides and downsides. Like when we look back and we think, oh yeah, like if he had been born in Venezuela or in Puerto Rico or anywhere else, there's a lot of upsides from like a human experience. Like it's richer because of the connection and it's richer because of just the experience of being closer to nature and all that. But it does have a lot of downsides, right? And then same here. Like there's a lot of upsides of like you have better education, you have you know a functioning health system and government and all those things. But there's a lot of like you're missing the connection, you're missing this, you're missing that. But if you have kind of like that understanding of what you're missing and you actively try to supplement it, I think we're actively trying to create a balanced experience for our son where it's not necessarily like he feels like he missed out on not growing up in Latin America. And with that, and obviously, like we're always surrounded by people from all over the world, and we're like kind of recreating those moments as much as possible. It's
Hmm.
not the same, but we try, and we try to do that for him.
That's awesome. And it leads me as far as one question. When you think of yourself, are you Venez- Venezolana, Venezuelan? Are you completely American? Do you feel you are American? And kind of my answer is I feel that literal 200% existence. I mean, in every aspect. I have two lives, that two
Mhm.
human beings in my brain, heart, and soul, that exist. Very American one and a very Latino one.
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel like I'm a 200% type of person. I've gotten smart at adapting my kind of how I show up depending on the environment. Um, there there's a moment in my life when I was kind of getting better at English. I was very annoying about really kind of nailing it. Like what you hear now, like what you would hear back in the day when I was actually trying to learn it was me emulating how my college peers would speak, right? And especially going to school for
Mhm.
communications, we had to do a lot of radio shows, a lot of recordings, a lot of voiceovers and stuff like that. And I would hear like we would play everything in class and you would see, everybody's perfect, beautiful English, like ready for Fox News. And then you'd hear me and I was like, oh God, like the accent and whatever. So I was vicious about getting into a recording booth and doing as many takes as it took to smooth out the accent as much as possible. But what ended up happening is I ended up sounding like someone I couldn't even recognize. I was like, yes, it's perfect. It blends in with, the rest of the class and what we're watching and what we're reviewing, but I feel like it's not me. So then I was like, and I would actually sound completely different. Like I would sound very pitchy and like feminine and stuff. And I was like, it's just not me, right? And
Yeah.
then at some point, I was like, look, I have to kind of show up as I am, right? So if I choose to kind of dial it down and maybe not speak perfectly, but I can still keep my pitch and I can still transition from English to Espanol without you being able to like really tell. Like it's seamless because it's still me talking. If I call
Yep.
you on the phone, you'd be able to recognize me, whatever I'm saying. And I was like, I kind of want to do that, like that middle of the road, like where you can be both. I can absolutely make it more professional, more polished, less accent, whatever, for whatever presentation or whatever interview or moment I have, if it requires that. But I'd rather kind of show up as like who I really am, and that was for me a big indicator. Like, do I sound like me? Do I recognize my own voice? So yeah, I mean, I think you can be all. And the interesting thing is, my dad's family, so on his side, they were Italian. So my name is Italian. I'm an
Yeah.
Italian passport. And when I was in college, I had to do an elective and I was learning English and learning Italian in English, which was interesting, learning another language while you're still learning another language.
Yeah.
So then I was like, why can't I be all these things? Why can't I be Italian enough? Why can't I be American enough? Why can't I be Venezuelan enough? And who's telling me that I can be? And how do I prove them wrong? And then a lot of it pointed back to me. Like I felt deep down that I wasn't American enough because I wasn't born here. I felt like I wasn't Italian enough because I didn't speak the language. And then I felt like I wasn't Venezuelan enough because now I have this rich American experience and all those things. It all points back to me. So if you get you out of the way, I think it's winning, right? Like there might be people out there actually calling you out and telling you things, but like how you confront them really matters and how you educate them really matters. But I think it's like kind of overcoming you because the finger pointing and the you're not enough and you're not Latino enough, you're not this enough because of here's proof that you don't speak perfect Italian. Here's proof that you don't speak perfect English. Here's proof that you don't longer eat arepas every day. Like that is 100% coming from you. No one is doing that to you. In my case, at
Wait,
least.
so I need a little bell that I can press because you've already dropped like two phrases that are absolutely going to become thumbnails. They're going to become posts. You will see them with your quote,
Oh, I'm so
overcoming
excited.
you. I've never heard anybody say it's a matter of overcoming you. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe some iteration of that, but I think it's a far stronger. Just the overcoming you, and it's so ironic too because you focus so much on the language skills, right? About communication, and now you work at one of the most important companies in the world
Mhm.
in the communication field. You're an influencer marketing manager, and so what I'd really love to do is I have to often remind myself during these conversations if I'm speaking to someone who is from the marketing or advertising world, literally nobody out there cares or knows what that really is. So, give me a little bit of background into what you do as an influencer marketing manager.
Yeah, so my profession is communications. Started as a journalist and then kind of evolved into more of like producer role. What I do is basically come up with interesting and cool campaigns to make Samsung, our brand, part of the conversation. Um, in many different aspects. Part of the social conversation, right? Just kind of providing that point of view as a brand. And then also kind of inspiring, empowering, educating people about products and innovations and things that could really help people's lives. So the way I think about it, like my job is to storytell through others, right? So as an influencer marketing manager, we're always kind of trying to find that opportunity to tell a story that is interesting and compelling. Obviously, that will get people to consider purchasing our products and using them. But the most important thing is like really kind of telling a story that matters to them, right? And finding those angles. So that's my job in a nutshell. It tends to
Yep.
be fun at times when it's like we've got productions, we've got events, we've got on sites, get to meet the most interesting people,
Right.
obviously. But also like the day to day is really important too, right? Like the minutia, the communications internally, the relationships internally, like navigating such a complex structure, not just with the with like Samsung in the States, but like at the headquarters level, it's taught me a lot as a person about flexibility and collaboration and just kind of really assuming good intent, right? Because there is always that language barrier between Korean and English and having to work with
Sure.
other subsidiaries or around the world where things could be misinterpreted because we don't speak the same language, but you always assume good intent. You always assume that people want to collaborate. And so it's been a very rich experience. I always equate my experience at Samsung with finally getting that MBA that I've been wanting. That is too expensive for me right now with a child.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah.
Um, so your what I take away from that is you help the brand tell compelling stories. You've got an interesting, compelling story. Have you ever found that you've directly pulled from sort of that experience and injected that into your work in some way?
Uh, the interesting thing is, for me, my experience, especially the experience that I just shared at the beginning of our
Mhm.
conversation, is part of my story. And it's almost kind of history. Like, it's really not like what I live through today. Like, it's not my reality, right? Like, I don't live in that struggle that I grew up in. I don't live in that lack of stability or like lack of direction and support and all that stuff. I have a completely different life now. So it's hard to pull from that place. First of all, because it would keep me stuck in that place mentally and emotionally. And second, because it's just not my reality. But I do think that there's certain things, right? Like there's like the human sensibility, right? Understanding when people are struggling, when whole groups of people are struggling, whole countries are struggling, continents, like all those things kind of help me kind of have a good perspective. But our the stories that we try to tell are more enriching and more empowering, maybe a little bit softer on that sense. It's not necessarily like change your life by using our products. It's more of like enrich your life, improve your life, hack your life. So those are stories are a little bit less about that. So I don't really think I pull a lot from that experience. I think I pull a lot from my life after that, my life in the States, and just kind of getting inspired and knowing that you can do whatever you set your mind to. Just understanding that every effort that you put in every day adds up, and you could have bad days and not put in the effort on those days, as long as those days don't turn into like weeks and months and then years, because then you're not really doing anything. But I
Right.
try not to because I do think it's a darker story and it's very deep. And I don't think that, especially the marketing that we're seeing these days, it's a lot more about lifting people up and inspiring people just more on a day to day level versus like inspiring true global change. I think that's
Yeah.
for other culture makers.
So I guess kind of where I was going with that question is, well, I mean, my advertising career was exclusively in the multicultural space. So
Mhm.
the issue of culture was extremely important, bringing
Mhm,
that cultural knowledge in order to develop relevant stories, right? To connect
mhm,
with people. Right now, we are seeing an absolute war on DE and I, right? Across uh, the private sector or the public sector for sure. Um, how and I know I've been very aware of Samsung being very strong proponent of DE and I efforts. I coincidentally just saw a webinar the other day that on LinkedIn that they were doing for celebrating 104 years of women getting the right to vote. Have
mm.
you seen here recently a really stark change about the conversation around DE and I?
What I've seen is that as we, and I say we, just marketers, not we brand, as we as marketers evolve to talk about the current generation, which is obviously Gen Zers, your Gen Alphas and stuff, their reality is so different that we do have to come at them a little bit different. When you look at the data and you look at specifically those cohorts, right, Gen Z and Gen A, and how they grew up and how they view their identity. You see a lot of, I think it was, I don't remember the last time I saw it, but it was like 40% identify as like two or more races, right? And so at that point, like what is the approach that kind of ladders back up to a DEI initiative if we're starting to talk to a demographic that lives and breathes it, right? Does it become less relevant or does it become more relevant because it's more homogenous? I don't know the answer. What I do know is like the more I look at kind of like data, like just media consumption patterns and stuff like that, the more I see that they just have so much in common. Like they just don't really care about saying like, oh, these people are my people because they come from the same country as me and my mom and my dad. Or like they really see no maps, no boundaries. And you're seeing the rise of like regional Mexican music because not only is it being adopted by people of Mexican descent who grew up in the States, but pretty much everybody who enjoys Latin music, which could be
Yeah.
anyone from any other Latin country or American or European or whatever. And so I actually like where this is going because it's getting a lot less about being topical and about talking about this 10% that specifically enjoys this specific genre and more about everything becoming a little bit more universal and like really having conversations about what we share versus about the things that make us different. So I've seen like, especially as I
Yeah.
try to push forward like certain efforts or certain partnerships, that always kind of ends up being the answer. That's like, yeah, like when you look at people's listenership habits on like Spotify or whatever, I mean, Gen Z, like 50, 60% of it listens to all the genres, right? They listen to
Hmm.
country, they listen to hip hop, they listen to rap, they listen to Tejano, they listen to like just all the things. So why do we like want to like pigeonhole anyone or like try to come at a certain approach? It would be interesting to see how leaning into that culture and those things that make the culture interesting could impact people who are not part of those minorities, quote unquote, because there is an interest, because they're already consuming it, because they are already mainstream, right?
They're not pushing against it. They are participating in it. And I can tell you that sadly, the state of the conversation, the type of conversation around DE and I isn't deep enough
Mhm,
because the campaigns that I know that I've worked on for over 20 years, the organizations that sort of pull together information and data for the multicultural advertising um, community has shown study after study that injecting culture into storytelling is not about fairness. It's not about doing the nice thing. There's ROI behind it. It's a business decision, and
mhm,
it's been proven over and over and over again. And it's precisely what you're saying. And not only does it allow people of a certain community to identify more with messages, but that message is actually more relevant to those that aren't part of that community because
mhm,
just like you said, they're kind of already consuming it. I mean,
mhm,
if reggaeton is, the number 2 genre. If Bad Bunny had the number 1 tour next to Taylor Swift over the last couple of years, there's something obviously there. And no, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I believe me, I've been pushing for a Bad Bunny, J Balvin, Rosalia, all types of partnerships. Just because I think, oh my, I mean, they're global phenomenons, and people are just fascinated with their point of view. Like each of them is unique for their own reasons, right? And like Bad Bunny not wanting to speak English in interviews or award shows or whatever, because he's like, if you're gonna listen to me, you're listening to me for the vibe. You may or may not know what I'm saying, and there's all kinds of AI things that can help you translate what I'm saying. You'll get it from someone. And then same thing with like, Rosalia and just a bunch of different artists. It's really about representing their culture authentically and not like, making it a little more palatable for anyone. No, it's doubling down. If my thing is Spanish music and castañuelas and whatever else, then that's what you're gonna see, whether she's working with a K-pop artist or with a reggaeton artist or
Mhm.
whoever. So I think it's beautiful because there's just this new wave of authenticity that people can relate to because it doesn't really matter. Oh, well, do you know about Spanish music? It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with, are you a human? Do you have feelings? Can you identify art? Can you feel through art? And that's all they're doing.
Right, right. So, here's the one of the questions that I kinda mentioned earlier that if I were interviewing, a man in your position, I wouldn't ask them, even
Mm,
if they are a father, I wouldn't ask them, "How has how is being a working mom these days? Is it
mm,
more pressure? Is it are have you seen adjustments to help kind of alleviate that?" And I ask because, right now we're having such an interesting conversation in the country around gender roles, and
mm,
it's funny to me because I knew nothing other than a corporate working mother, and so that's I never had another vision of, gender roles outside of that. My father was always extremely supportive of that as well. Um, but, we're actually really digging in and some young people are like, well, yeah, maybe we should go back to more traditional roles. That feminism
mm,
didn't actually work out. Feminism said that we could all have it all, but nobody recognizes the fact that, there's a mom tax after you take maternity leave and you come back, and
mm,
so how how have you managed that? And
mm.
how is that going? Because your son is 4, you said, right?
My son is 4, he just started pre-K. This I'm still going through it, so I don't have a clear assessment because when you're in the middle of the storm, you really kind of don't know how you're faring. You're just doing your best every day. But I can tell you from what I've seen, because I'm the youngest of 4 sisters, and what I've seen motherhood be for them and their experience versus mine, it's very different. I think it has to do a lot with kind of where we are socially, where the economy is, and all the things. There's a phase in your life where, in our experience, where the woman has to work, right? Before there was a choice. Do you want to work or do you not want to work? Like, you don't have to work because what one person makes is enough to sustain a family. And
Mhm.
now you actually need 2 incomes to sustain a family of 3. And so that kind of no longer was a choice for me. And I think having the choice is nice, and people should do whatever they want to do because there are moments when I think, if this is the only child I'm having, then I should be cherishing every single day. And there might be times in our lives when we just need to put family first versus career. It doesn't mean that I'm putting it on pause forever. It just means that I'm taking a little break. So I'm actually a proponent for people doing whatever works for them and not dictating, like, oh, it used to be
Agree.
easier or it used to be harder. I mean, it's very different for every single person. So for me, it's been challenging because I had a child during the pandemic. Like, he was born on the first day of lockdown. So even like that alone makes the experience very intense and very stressful, like putting him in daycare and all those things. The financial pressures that came after 2020, right, are
Mhm.
especially heavier for parents of young children because you have to, deal with like the mortgage increases and the cost of living increases while at the same time adjusting to monumental new expenses in feeding somebody else, diapers, daycare, dressing them because they grow every other week. Um, and so it is really tough because then it becomes you no longer have the choice. Like if you wanted to stay home because it's hard to balance it, you no longer have the choice to like stay home if you wanted to. You now have to work. So
Yeah.
I think it is tougher. And then you're working harder and maybe earning more than you were before, but your dollars were going a lot less further. And so you just have to be a lot more cautious with that. So,
And
um,
you're working more than a 9 to 5 because now you can take that laptop home, and so when you are home with the kids, are you actually there, you know?
yeah, no, you're expected to work. And I don't, this is not specific to the company I work for now or anything like that, but I do think we were just in a different era after COVID where you can be productive from anywhere, which is both a blessing and a curse. To me, like in my experience specifically, like having a support system both at work and in your personal life is the key to saying this is a lot harder or a lot less harder. Like having a supportive partner who, shares the responsibilities of the home, of the child caring and stuff, having someone to step in for you when you're up to bat and you have big projects and for a week you have to put work first, which I would never do long term, but like there might be times when you have to like travel and like just, be at the head of certain things and not really be able to be ingrained in the day to day. That's been game changing for me. And when I look at people around me, like it really has been about communicating with my partner, like, hey, I know this is like the way things normally work or like the way we were raised, but like I'm really struggling with this. Or how can we redivide, reassess, or the plan for this week is this because I'm going to be at 0% capacity. There's what's her name? Brene Brown. I'm sure you're familiar with her.
Love her.
She there's a viral clip of her where she was talking about like the daily check-ins with her partner, and partner could be whoever you share your life with. Your
Sure, sure.
like anyone, like just whoever is present in your life. And you're like, okay, I'm at 50% today. How's your tank? No, I'm really at a 20%. I'm really just not going to be able to blah, blah, blah. And as a team, you decide, okay, so today we're not cooking, today we're ordering in, today we're just like vegging out and doing the things that we need to do just to kind of get through the day. And having that is so game changing. And I've tried to have that approach with my husband. And we try to kind of make those decisions day by day. Like it's not about having it all. It's not about doing everything at once. It's like, where's your energy? How do you feel? What's today look like for you? What can we do? How can we get you to kind of replenish that energy and kind of be your optimal self? You can't expect that every day. You just can't kill it and hustle every day.
And that daily check-in, I mean, that's not helpful to it's not just helpful to manage responsibilities, but I think if a couple could communicate at that level, that there's so much to be gained from an exercise like that for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, we
That's
don't do
great.
it consistently every day, but I think it's like when I'm like, oh no. Oh, and now, little plug. But now I have this thing, this little uh Samsung Galaxy ring, that literally tells you what your energy score is every day,
Yeah.
what your sleep score is. And it's been game changing for me because it's like, oh man, sometimes I think it was in my brain. I'm like, maybe I didn't sleep well, or maybe I'm just not up to going to the gym at 5 a.m. today. And then there's like a visual confirmation of like, you know what, you didn't really sleep well last night, so just like take it easy. And the difference it makes in having a better day. Yeah, you could choose to stay disciplined and just push through with a low score, whatever, or you could just choose to give yourself grace and be like, you know what, today I'm gonna take it easy because I really need to. I didn't sleep really well.
My wife and I got those, over a year and a half ago, and we absolutely love it because I it absolutely helps in being mindful because
Hmm.
it it does it that it's such a great piece of information,
Hmm.
to confirm that, yeah, maybe you should take it easier. This is how bad you actually really slept, and maybe you didn't realize it. You're and it's been absolutely fascinating for sure to use it, and we use it every single day.
I love that. Yeah, I'm new to it. And it's I was actually having this conversation with someone who's very athletic and who also has the ring. And so I was telling her like, well, there might be days where my energy score is like 50 something, so I might choose not to go to the gym. And she's like, no, no. For me, those are the days when I need to get to the gym because I need to figure out what's weighing me down. If that's my therapy, I need to get on the treadmill. I need to
Yeah.
kill it. I need to just get up a boost, and if I need to take a nap, I'll take a nap. But I'd rather not skip. So it just depends on like what works for every person and kind of knowing kind of what refills you. I think that's really important too.
Yeah. Um, so my kids are college age now. So I've got a kid in college. Finished his freshman year. My daughter's a senior in high school, and that's they're not that um, different in age. I mean, significant amount of age from like your son. But I think maybe the times are very different for the one that my kids had a childhood and your kid's childhood.
Mhm.
What keeps you up about the current environment right now that, when you think about his future, what it's going to be like? What keeps you up?
Um, there's like three things. Um, One of them is obviously, I think everybody's always been worried about the future, but we are especially worried about the future because we kind of have data, right, that says climate change is real, like all the things, like just trends, right? Like certain things that might just not make a good experience for, it no longer is about his choices, and what he's choosing to do with his life is just like global environment, right? Hotter, more electric demand and all that. Um, and obviously we're going through just some sort of like social awakening and there's changes happening. There's tons of like confusion and stuff. And like growing up in that kind of noisy environment was not something that I was planning for my child. I thought I had escaped like political turmoil 20 something years ago and that my child would never have to go through it. But now we're at least experiencing some sort of stress coming from that.
Right.
But I think I try to be objective about it and be like, okay, during the Great Depression or during World War I and II and stuff, like everybody really worried about the future. And you just have to find a way to like trust that this is a season, that at some point it becomes predictable, that peace is in the horizon, that stability is in the horizon. And if that's not the case, then that God protects him. But that's one thing. And I try not to do that too much because I'm like, look, like no one knew that 2024 was going to be what it is, and we somehow made it through it. Or 2020, I mean.
Mhm.
That Not having a second child and knowing how important my sisters are in my life, like, you ebb and flow through relationships, you grow out certain people and friendships and stuff. You have things with your family, kind of like, me and my mom, or me and my dad, where it's, kind of depending on the season of life and stuff. But my constant have always been my sisters, and I have three. It just kind of depends on like what I'm going through. And not having a second child because of, stress and health and the economy and all the things and how expensive it is to have a child in daycare. I want him so bad to have a partner and a buddy, and it doesn't have to be, someone who's exactly the same age and who they can play with, but like just like a friend for life. Like that's
Yeah.
something that keeps me up at night. But he's still four, so we can still
And hey,
figure it out.
sometimes it's like they say, friends are the family you get to choose, and
Mhm.
sometimes you're a lot closer to them than your actual family for any number
Right.
of reasons, right?
100%.
Yeah. So I do, in spite of, sort of the turmoil in which we live, I do sense a different spirit of optimism, which I think is refreshing because I probably dig way too deep. Politics is my hobby. I can't go to bed unless I've consumed enough political news, and so it's very easy to, you know, get negative, but I have to be mindful about it and catch myself and say, you know what, we're still pretty okay, and it's gonna be fine.
Were you ever interested in like news, like journalism growing
Uh,
up or?
I'll No, I wasn't. Not in the least. I got an international business degree,
Hmm.
because my dream was to graduate college and work for an American company in any Latin American country. That was what I was going to do. I
Is
was
a
going to
dream.
move. Yeah, but no, I probably should have some in some sense, and now my kid is obsessed with it too. He's on the
Yeah.
path to he right now he's wants to be an international civil rights attorney, and
Oh,
he
wow.
so Yeah, and he's obsessed with it too, and he's doing really well with it. It's a perfect segue to my last question, actually,
Mm,
and it's kind of um, a trite question, a common question, but I think an important one because every now and then these situations come true and you get a chance to mentor somebody or give somebody um, a, a word. And I've had a number of those occasions when someone told me something that really helped set me up to a certain degree. If you were to meet someone, a student graduating college right now
mm.
from UTA, and they're making their initial steps into the corporate world, what would you like? What would you love for them to know that you didn't know, but once you found out was like, wow, it would have everything would have been so different?
Yeah, I thought about this a little bit when you sent me the question, and this is a it's not a very like, oh my God, go get it type of answer. I really think you need to be very transparent with yourself and what you're trying to gain from life. And you need to hold yourself
Mm,
accountable from making sure that you are not trying to gain something that just offsets your trauma. So, like, I want to be successful because I was looked down on. I want to be rich because I was so poor. I want to be independent or artistic or express myself because I was so controlled. Like, don't make the rest of your life a reaction to kind of like your upbringing and stuff. I would say like really focus on developing your mind, your body, and your spirit, right? Like if you're going to college, you're doing all the right things for your career. You can't put aside your mental health. You can't put aside your social circle, if it's important for you to stay in touch with your faith or believe something, like faith fuels hope and you need hope to like just achieve your dreams and do things every day. And these are three things that I think kind of keep you from chasing the money. It's so easy to chase the money. And right now, there's so many opportunities, right? Like anybody pretty much could be anything, right? You could be a creator and be a millionaire overnight from getting God knows how many views and just getting paid. And you still see a lot of those people who just don't feel quite content about with their life, right? They just feel like they're missing out on their calling and stuff. And I think you don't know what that is if you focus on just one aspect of life. Like you should never be just focused on I gotta get promoted. I gotta get my money. I gotta do everything right. Because then you miss out on like the people around you, the experience around you, right? Like when and this happened to me, I was guilty of this at the beginning of my career, until I got to JCPenney actually, where I was like so focused on being the hardest working person and so focused on hustling and getting stuff done that I would like miss out on like cool moments and like bonding moments and like developing friendships with people who were probably some of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life working in a newsroom with a bunch of people who were like transplants from all over. And like when I think about it, it's because I was so focused on getting the most out of this professionally that I didn't think about getting the most out of it personally. And it like that's the whole thing, right? Like you're going through this not just as a professional. Professionals are replaceable, but you as a
mhm.
person are irreplaceable. So how can you make that a rich experience for you as a person, something that enhances you, makes you better, makes you a better person to be around, like makes you memorable. I don't know. I just think we, especially during college age, was just thinking so hard about what we should be achieving and how much we should be making and all those things. And like at some point you'll get it. Like you work hard enough, you probably will get it, and then you'll be empty. So what was the point of that if you're not developing yourself as a person and surrounding yourself with people who love you and want what's best for you, or that you're learning from at least?
I'm a lot older than you are, but I could still apply so much of that advice today to my own life, honestly. Yeah, and I think that is truly amazing and wisdom, and I know it'll certainly serve someone who hears that. Ori, I know I'm taking up a lot of your time, but I've really got to thank you so much for being uh, so generous and opening up that way, um, sharing, your story in such a personal way, and just, being open to doing that seriously, because that's precisely why I'm trying to do this. And this is the exact type of conversation I want to have. And thank you for giving me that.
I'm so grateful for your invitation. I'm happy we got to have this conversation. It's cathartic for me to look back at my, just my path and be like, whoa, I just did that. And I didn't just did that. I've been doing that, and it's just like this realization of like you can get out of whatever you're going through, right? You can, and like 70% of it depends on you. And so why wouldn't you just like go all out, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. But no, thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure. I wish you the best with this podcast. I hope everyone that listens gets inspired and loves it.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
All right,
Bye bye.
bye.